Every advanced AI model, every stealth fighter, every smartphone in your pocket. All of it depends on a single company, on a single island, sitting 90 miles off the coast of a nation that claims to own it. That company is TSMC. It manufactures roughly 70% of the world's semiconductors, and it is responsible for more than 90% of the most advanced chips ever built. If that one facility goes dark for 6 months, the global economy does not slow down. It stalls. Here is the part that should actually alarm you. Almost no government on Earth has a real plan for the day it happens. Start with the object itself. A modern chip is a sliver of silicon smaller than a fingernail, etched with billions of transistors in patterns you cannot see with the naked eye. This single supply chain touches artificial intelligence data centers, electric vehicle motors, satellite systems, missile guidance, and the phone in your hand, all running through the exact same narrow fabrication bottleneck. Building the most advanced version of that object requires machines so precise that only one company on the planet makes them, ASML, in the Netherlands, whose extreme ultraviolet lithography systems cost hundreds of millions of dollars apiece. But owning the machine is only half the problem. Turning that machine into a working chip factory takes decades of accumulated expertise, an entire ecosystem of suppliers, and a tolerance for risk most companies never accept. Taiwan built that ecosystem on purpose. In 1987, a Texas Instruments veteran named Chang founded TSMC on a strategy nobody else in the industry wanted to try: manufacture chips designed by other companies and compete with none of them. The Taiwanese government backed the bet with subsidies, tax incentives, and a purpose-built research hub at Hsinchu. Decades of compounding investment later, that bet turned into something close to a monopoly. Design still happens mostly in the United States, at companies like NVIDIA, Apple, and AMD. But the actual fabrication, the delicate process of etching billions of transistors onto a wafer, happens almost entirely in Taiwan. This is not redundancy. It is concentration. And concentration is exactly what makes a system efficient right up until the moment it breaks. Most people will never think about this supply chain because it is designed to be invisible. You do not see TSMC when you unlock your phone or ask an AI model a question. You see the result. The infrastructure underneath, the actual choke point making all of it possible, sits outside almost everyone's field of view. That is exactly what makes it dangerous. This concentration created a theory known as the Silicon Shield. The argument goes like this: China will not invade Taiwan because doing so would destroy the very factories China itself depends on. Beijing imports enormous quantities of Taiwanese chips for its own electronics and military production. An invasion that damaged TSMC's fabs would not just hurt the West, it would gut China's own technological base in the process. For years, this theory functioned as a quiet deterrent, an assumption baked into how governments planned around the Taiwan question. Mutual dependency, the logic went, makes conflict irrational for everyone involved. But strip away the specific material, silicon, instead of any other element, and you are looking at a pattern that shows up everywhere in 21st century geopolitics. It is the same mechanism driving the fight over rare earth elements, over gallium and germanium, over the narrow set of facilities that can process raw ore into the ultra-pure materials modern chips and modern weapons actually require. Power today rarely comes from who owns a raw resource. It comes from who controls the bottleneck stage where that resource becomes usable. China's dominance in rare earth processing did not happen because China has some geological monopoly on the periodic table. It happened because China invested for decades in the unglamorous, expensive, environmentally costly business of refining and separating those elements, while other countries walked away from that business as unprofitable. Taiwan did the exact same thing with semiconductor fabrication, just with silicon instead of neodymium. Once you see this pattern, you cannot unsee it. The chip war and the minerals war are not two separate stories. They are the same story, told twice, because the underlying logic of processing concentration is identical whether the material in question is a rare earth or a wafer of silicon. Here is where the silicon shield theory starts to fall apart. A deterrent only holds if both sides can absorb the shock of the thing it supposedly protects. Taiwan's chip monopoly does not sit on solid ground. It sits on an island that experiences major earthquakes, one of which, in 1999, disrupted chip production worldwide within hours. It sits on a power grid that depends almost entirely on imported energy. It sits on fabrication plants that consume enormous volumes of fresh water in a place that has already faced serious droughts. None of that requires an invasion. A natural disaster, a prolonged drought, or a naval blockade that never fires a shot could achieve the same disruption a war would. The silicon shield assumes rational actors calculating costs and benefits. It says nothing about geology, weather, or accident. This is not hypothetical either. When the United States tightened export controls on advanced AI chips, the shock did not stay contained to one company or one country. It hit businesses across multiple continents within weeks, forcing some of them to ration the very processors their AI systems depend on. A restriction aimed at a single choke point rippled through nearly the entire global technology economy almost overnight, because there was no alternative pipeline ready to absorb the shortfall. And here is the part almost nobody wants to say out loud. Both the United States and China are actively racing to break this exact dependency, the one that is supposed to be keeping the peace. Washington passed the CHIPS Act and is pouring subsidies into new fabs in Arizona. Beijing is funneling billions into domestic champions like SMIC, trying to build its own version of what Taiwan already has. Every dollar spent on that race is, by definition, a dollar spent trying to make Taiwan less indispensable. If that effort ever succeeds, the dependency currently discouraging conflict disappears. The shield does not get stronger. It gets removed. And building a competing fabrication ecosystem from scratch does not happen in months. Industry estimates put the timeline in years, sometimes a full decade, before any rival facility reaches the yields and precision Taiwan already has. That creates a strange, dangerous window, a period where the world knows the choke point is unsustainable, is actively working to dismantle it, but has not yet built anything to replace it. So here is the analytical tool worth taking away from all of this. Stop asking which country owns a resource. Start asking who controls the narrow stage where that resource becomes usable, whether that is refining rare earths, separating cobalt from copper ore, or etching a silicon wafer at 3 nanometers. That single question explains far more of the headlines coming out of Washington, Beijing, and Taipei than any story about territorial ambition or ideology ever will. It also explains why export controls keep failing to work exactly as intended. Every time a government restricts access to a choke point, it hands the target a permanent incentive to build an alternative, and once that alternative exists, the original leverage is gone for good. That is not a hypothetical. It is the pattern playing out right now, in real time, across both the chip industry and the mineral industry simultaneously. Understanding that pattern will not tell you exactly when the next crisis hits, but it will tell you where to look, and it will make you far harder to fool the next time a headline tries to convince you that any of this is simple. If this choke point logic, one company, one island, deciding the pace of the entire global economy, is the kind of analysis you want more of, this is exactly the argument I build out in full in the Geopolitics of Everything Tech. It walks through the chip war, the AI race, and the data sovereignty fights shaping this decade chapter by chapter, with the reasoning behind every claim in this video. And if you're curious how this exact same processing choke point logic plays out in the mineral supply chains behind batteries, defense systems, and the energy transition, that's the specific argument I make in The Elements of Power from my Critical Materials series. The two books weren't written together, but they're describing the same structural phenomenon from two different angles. And reading them side by side will change how you read every geopolitics headline afterward. Links to both are in the description. See you in the next one.